Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by John J. Miller. He's the director of the Dow Journalism Program at Hillsdale, as well as a reporter for the National Review. John, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.
So, media is obviously an important part of what you do, being in journalism, being a reporter. Tell us a little bit, though, about your backstory and how you got involved in chasing a media or journalistic direction.
Well, I've been on the staff of National Review for 17 years or so. I graduated from college, went out to Washington, D.C., and became a professional writer. After a few years there, I joined the staff of the magazine, which was my favorite magazine when I was in college. When I was 18 years old, I dreamed of writing for National Review, and then I got the opportunity to do it. So I've been on staff ever since. About 4 years ago, I had a great opportunity to go to Hillsdale College in Michigan and run the journalism program there. So I do that most of the time now. That's my day job, as it were, but I also stay with the magazine.
So talk to me about the bushy-eyed youth wanting to pursue journalism and the National Review specifically. What were some of the takeaways you've learned from not only being inside the National Review, but looking at competitive publications and kind of what you saw out there?
Well, the most important thing about learning to do journalism is you just actually have to do journalism. You need to practice it, you need to do it. You don't need to think about it, you don't need to sit in a classroom and learn about it so much, although we can do a little bit of classroom instruction. You really need to jump in and do it, right, and start interviewing people and let the experience become the teacher and learn how to tell stories and become better and better at it.
And so, it sounds logical, but is that what you're seeing coming out of other journalism schools, or the approach, or is there, do you see any steering of content or the direction or the ways that people should report information, or is it more that old school approach of your opinion doesn't matter as much as getting the correct facts out there for folks?
Well, there are 100 different ways of doing it. There are lots of journalism programs and schools, and they do all kinds of different things. At Hillsdale, I'll tell you what we do, which is a little bit different from other places. Number one is journalism is not a major, it's a minor. Hillsdale College's strength is in the traditional liberal arts. We want our students to major in history or biology or math or English or what have you, and fill their heads with real knowledge from our great teachers of these subjects. Then you learn journalism by actually doing journalism. You work for the campus paper, and we do a little bit of classroom instruction. We talk about how to write a lead, how to do a headline, how to interview people, how to put together a story. But really, the lessons take place in the newsroom, where the students put out a publication week after week after week, and we tell them how to report the news. We also do a little bit of opinion writing to learn how to do that. And one of the things they learn there is that the best opinion writing is based on reporting. You know, in opinion journalism, which is what we do at National Review, one of the first things you learn is that opinions are cheap. Everybody has one. But the way to make yours distinctive, the way to make yours respected and have people listen to it is have it based on fact, have it based on reporting, bring new information to the table, and help people understand what it means.
And so how does that correlate with all of the things that are happening where you've got so many more citizen journalists? They're untrained, they're out there, they're spewing the opinions. They don't necessarily do it with facts, or they do it with very skewed facts. How is that kind of changing, or how is the professional journalism community responding to that?
Well, it's completely different from what it was a generation ago. When I was in college, and then when I first went into journalism in Washington, D.C. as a professional writer, there was no internet. Right. There was no email. I remember the first time we got a dial-up AOL connection and so on. I remember the first time when I heard there's this thing called the internet that's coming, and then it came, and it's changed everything about journalism. And some of the great titans of the news business we've seen fall. Right. Does anybody read Time magazine anymore, or get Newsweek magazine at home anymore? So much has changed, and you have the barriers to entry have collapsed completely. So that now anybody with a Twitter account can claim at some level, at least a little bit plausibly, to be a journalist. That doesn't mean they're all worth following. Not every blog is good, but a lot of people can get involved. They can try journalism. They can do it part-time. They can focus on city council meetings in their hometown. And if you're following the right people, the right kind of blogs, you get a great amount of information now. It's never been easier to get information than it is right now. It's never been easier to get good information than it is right now. But you're right, there's a lot of bad information out there, and it's up to us as consumers of it to discriminate.
Right. Yeah, discernment is something that does become challenging when you've got so much there, and then getting past your own personal biases of, I'm going to believe this because it aligns with my viewpoints versus the others. You see a lot of those kinds of fights manifesting themselves on Facebook because somebody read a blog somewhere from someone of questionable credibility in many cases, and they're spewing.
Well, there's a lot of bad information out there.
Sure.
One of the obligations of good journalism is to set the record straight, to describe what the facts are,
right,
and so on. And you know, my students at Hillsdale College will hear a rumor on campus, or they'll hear about something that happened, and it'll be, should we report it or not? And one of the reasons say we got to report this because we need to get the facts straight. If students aren't presented with a story about something that happened on campus, there's going to be a million rumors about what happened. We need to tell the story so that students know.
Well, so one of the other interesting things I think that's evolving with journalism now is that you see a lot of reporters that they'll write their article, but then they'll have a completely separate blog post, and so they get the chance to do the facts and the opinions and kind of draw their own conclusions in a slightly different medium. But there's also now more interaction with society at large in response to the things. It's no longer as much of a one-way mechanism. Has gone way past the editor, like the responses and that kind of thing. How do you think that that's going to eventually change the face of media?
Well, we're all multimedia now,
right?
I write for my magazine, but then the articles in the print copy of the magazine will appear on the internet, and I'll blog about them, and I'll put them on my social media platforms, and just try and get as many people reading my copy as possible. In addition, I'm podcasting, doing a bunch of other things. You're always trying to call attention to your work, get more eyeballs on what you're doing. And as a component of that, people are responding to it. I used to write a letter to the editor, but now you can respond on Facebook or on Twitter, and so oftentimes reporters will engage with people who are doing that kind of reading. So there's a community that's always existed, because there's always been back and forth with letters to the editor and op-ed pieces and exchanges of views and so on, but now it's very fast, and it can happen almost instantaneously.
Right. And so, good thing or bad thing? Or
I think it's a good thing. First of all, it's sort of silly to argue whether it's a good thing or bad thing, because it's happening,
right,
and we just need to deal with it, right? I think it's, by and large, is a good thing. I can think of all the bad things that are associated with it. A lot of people will post to Twitter or post their blogs without ever an editor looking at what they've done, which is where mistakes get made. Sometimes you write with a little bit more emotion. Maybe you should sleep on that point of view before you put it out there. You want someone with a little bit of discernment to give you advice, or say, do you want, double check that fact? I don't think that's quite right. You want that kind of team approach. That can be a real strength on the one hand. On the other hand, I love the fact that these barriers have fallen down completely. That anybody who wants to try this can get involved. That you can begin to blog, you can begin to report, you can do some part-time reporting, you can enter this profession more easily than ever before. And I think that's a good thing for the news business and for people who want to receive information and learn about the world around them.
Okay. And so you'd mentioned your part of the program. Anything else that Hillsdale is specifically doing to help further this idea of more getting involved in journalism, or other programs that you just wanted to cover for a minute from their perspective?
Well, certainly Hillsdale College has the Dow Journalism program. We're trying to train a new generation of excellent journalists to go into the newsrooms and video rooms of America and be great reporters for the 21st century. I'm also involved with a group called the Student Free Press Association. We have a website called the College Fix, which is it's student-reported news from colleges and universities around the country. And so they're telling some of the stories of political correctness that mainstream papers won't tell. It's reports from the front lines about what's really happening with professors in classrooms and so on. And that's a great way for students to try out journalism, to tell some stories that aren't getting told in their mainstream campus papers even, and get some exposure to their work.
Well, but not only that. I mean, I think that traditionally, when journalism was great, and it still is great, but when it was actually more investigative. When they were telling stories that weren't being heard, they were exposing things more, not for political reasons necessarily, but just because the story needed to be told. It's exciting stuff that you're encouraging the students to get involved in doing and exposing.
Well, it's a lot of fun, and we're hearing stories that wouldn't be heard but for this platform. For example, you may have heard that the University of Michigan was going to have an airing of the film, a viewing of the film American Sniper.
Okay.
And so there were a bunch of protests saying this is an offensive film, it's a racist film, it's militaristic, you can't show it on campus, so the administration canceled the film. And they decided to replace it with Paddington Bear for the college students. And this was a big sensation. It was reported on the College Fix first, Drudge linked to it, and suddenly everybody was talking about it, and the university felt some pressure. And so they showed Paddington Bear, but then they also decided to show American Sniper. And something good happened as a result of that.
And the American Sniper didn't take out Paddington Bear after.
Not that I heard.
Okay.
That'd be a great film, though.
Fluff everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. So some of the things, as people are starting to shift toward 2016, they'll be watching more and more media reporting, they'll be watching commercials, they'll be trying to ingest all of this stuff, which may or may not be skewed to one direction or another. There may be attacks from in the media and everything else, but we've got a number of people starting to announce their presidencies or their candidacies for the presidency. Just for fun, would love to just get your perspectives on what they need to do from either a damage control perspective, a general media strategies perspective for some of the ones that we know are out there now or that will be out there in the next couple of weeks. Do you have thoughts on how they need to approach things?
Well, first of all, what an exciting race this will be. Never in my life has the Republican nomination been more open than it is now. There have been other times where the process has been competitive. You weren't quite sure who the nomination was going to be, but never has it felt more open than right now, at least in my lifetime. So it's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I would say first and foremost, that's what people should do. Just watch these candidates, see how they perform. You don't need to pick a winner today, but we want to see these people perform. You want to see them in debates and so on. On the other side, the Democrats never has it been less open. Never, except when there's already someone in office, seeking a renomination. Right. But when there's going to be a new nominee, never does it seem less open. So Hillary Clinton is the presumptive favorite. She's inevitable, I suppose, until she's not, right? I mean,
Obama took her out before.
You never know. She has been beaten, right? But this is a little bit different dynamic from what we've seen in the past. And I think for conservatives, for Republicans, it'll be fun to watch and to learn who these people are.
Do you think Elizabeth Warren will get in to go against Hillary? You think she'll sit back? Because that would be an interesting race to watch as well, just to see how they competed against each other.
I have no idea. I suspect not. There will be a field of Democrats, but they're not even the seven dwarfs yet, right? I mean, they're almost aspiring to seven dwarf status. That's how she's in such a commanding position right now.
Okay. And so on the Republican side, since we're starting to know who those players are going to be, and we're already seeing some strategies coming out and what they're trying to feed to the media. Like, for example, I saw a Ted Cruz commercial the other day that was heavily targeting the evangelicals, not necessarily talking about policy at all. Is that kind of thing wise, or is it wise in the primary versus in the general? Or is it just too over the top, or you're just trying to play to one part of the country? I mean, how would you, from a media perspective, journalistic perspective, respond to that kind of
it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not a political consultant.
Right.
I'm hardly expert enough to tell these guys what to be doing. Evangelicals obviously are a very important part of the Republican primary voter bloc, and that group always seems to weigh in and have an awful lot to say, and they're behind the phenomenon of Mike Huckabee in 2008, Rick Santorum in 2012. Ted Cruz is trying to represent them in this cycle. What we've seen in the past, they tend not to be, these guys were not the nominees, but they become serious candidates. We'll see what Ted Cruz can do there. These candidates should probably just be themselves, though, and talk about their records and try and inspire potential voters.
Right. Thoughts on Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson is supposed to be announcing soon.
Ben Carson's supposed to be announcing soon. Marco Rubio is the most electric speaker in the group. He's the one that you will like his speeches the best. He will pump you up in that sense. Jeb Bush's record as governor is more conservative than most people recognize. He was an incredibly conservative governor. With the exception of Scott Walker, in this field, he may have the best conservative record of anybody else. Although everybody calls him a moderate now, which he would have been shocked to hear when he was governor. People calling him a moderate because of what he did. A lot of people think he's weak on education because he supports Common Core, and that could be a problem for him. But he was a great conservative governor on education in Florida, with school choice, with all kinds of reforms there on racial preferences and what have you. He was a great leader on that issue there, and I think a lot of conservatives should probably give him a look. I think a lot of them are saying, I just wish his last name wasn't Bush. which creates a kind of problem.
Yeah, because people are kind of shying away from dynasties and that kind of, which could also be a problem for Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that could distinguish this race would be completely new, at least in our lifetimes as observers of this process. Assuming Hillary Clinton is the nominee of the Democrats, this will be the first time that the Republican nominee, if it's not Jeb or a couple of these other guys, would be about a generation younger. Sometimes you see a matchup where the Republican is the elder statesman, you know, the adult in the room, and there's an exciting younger Democrat who either wins or loses. This will be the reverse. It'll be Hillary Clinton, you know, Grandma Hillary, and then maybe a Republican who is about a generation younger.
Right.
And will look fresh, will seem like has new ideas, will feel younger in a lot of ways. This is a dynamic we've not seen before.
And just out of curiosity, from a journalistic perspective, are you seeing trends in issues that are going to be most important to the general population, to voters, in their considerations of these candidates, regardless of what their individual platforms are? I mean, in previous elections, healthcare was a hot topic. I mean, the economy is kind of lukewarm right now. Healthcare, a lot of people are figuring, is settled. Are there any...
I think economy is always first.
Right.
In every election, economy is always number one. How's the economy doing? And what might happen in the future with different visions and so forth. I think that's number one. That's always going to be number one. Number two, healthcare will be a big deal. There'll be a lot of conversation about that. Some Supreme Court rulings coming up may affect the conversations that take place, the political debates take place, some choices that the courts make this summer will have a lot of bearing there. I also think this could be a foreign policy election in a way that often, well, more of a foreign policy election than at other times. Foreign policy is often on the back burner. The troubles in the world right now are so severe that we might not be able to ignore it the way we often do during elections. Voters may have their eye on it in a way that they haven't in a couple previous cycles. I don't know about that, but the world feels like a more dangerous place than it did 4 years ago.
And what about, I mean, Obama kind of ran as a uniter and somebody who could close the racial divide and that kind of thing. It didn't turn out to be that way necessarily by the time his term has been over. Do you think that that's going to be an issue for any of the candidates about trying to be perceived as bringing the country together as opposed to ripping it apart?
Everyone wants to do that, and Americans actually want that to happen. I think ordinary Americans want to be brought together. They don't want to be pulled apart by race. They don't want recognize these divisions and so forth, but they don't want them to split us in bad ways. I think most Americans want that, and they're going to be looking for messages about uniting us. And no matter what you think of President Obama, his election as the first black president says something very good about the United States.
Agreed.
The ability for this to happen. I think every American can take a certain amount of pride in that happening. Setting aside maybe his performance as president, that this represents something good about America, and we like to feel good about what our country is.
Any things that people out in the world should be looking at when they're trying to discern who is the best candidate that matches their goals? There's always going to be the conflicting opinions that are going to be injected. Are there any telltale signs that something might be skewed in one direction or another, or that the media may not be playing fairly, or journalists may not be playing fairly?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's a lot of journalists who don't play fairly.
Right.
What you want to find are sources of news, reporters, and then media outlets that are responsible, that you basically can trust and follow the news through them. Of course, never has it been easier for candidates to speak directly to people. So you can do that as well. Take the filter of the media out, really, and listen. You can look up Marco Rubio's announcement speech, on YouTube. You can watch that right now, and you don't need a reporter to interpret that for you. People have that power now. They didn't have that a generation ago.
Okay. And so then just on the other side of your fence, the National Review side, are you seeing any trends in that direction of news in general that are tending to be more interesting or getting better pickup? Where does society seem to be hungry for information right now? Or even on the Hillsdale
Well, it's
side?
just a huge amount of information. We're really good at producing information. There's too much information, really. A lot of people feel overwhelmed by the amount of information out there. I think one of the best things news organizations can do is use their discernment about what is the most important news, and people want to have this packaged for them, have it presented to them in a kind of digest form that you can use. If you've got, what do you have, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day to think about the news? Maybe you listen a little bit on the radio on the way to work, maybe follow a few stories at night. If you can find some sources that present you with the most important things that's happening in the United States and around the world, you need to find organizations that can do that for you.
Any examples of those kinds of organizations that would be more or less neutral? So people, one of the things that I've come across a lot of people, because of the information overload, they're going, what is actually neutral? Where can I get facts versus all of the other stuff that's out there so I can make an educated decision? Any outlets you recommend? Or?
Yeah, so first of all, there's a kind of cult of objectivity in journalism, but so often it's a kind of phony objectivity, right? That they claim to be unbiased, they claim to be neutral, but really they're not.
Right.
And every time you put a news story on the front page of your paper, you're making a judgment that it belongs on the front page and not some other story, or is this the top story of the day? You're making judgments all the time. These are not neutral decisions. These are biased decisions. That doesn't mean it's biased for Republican or Democrat necessarily, but you're using your judgment all the time. Bias can creep into it. And the news media, the mainstream news media, as we know, is overwhelmingly liberal. So you see that reflected. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Jose Mercury News, overwhelmingly liberal. Yes. So this is what you will get. They will often report facts. You can learn things about what's happening in the world, but you should look at some alternative sources as well. National Review, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, Real Clear Politics is a great news aggregator website. There are lots of places you can go to get different perspectives. And I think informed people don't want to get one point of view. They want to get lots of different points of view. They want to hear from people they agree with, but they also want to test their ideas and hear them challenged. And what is the other side saying? You want to learn that. That's never been easier to do than now.
Right. And so we just have a couple of quick minutes left. Talk to us a little bit about how people can find out more about what you're up to at Hillsdale. Website?
Sure. So Hillsdale College, small liberal arts college in rural Michigan. We have a website at hillsdale.edu. I have a personal website, which is heymiller.com, which is like you're shouting at me, Hey Miller, HEYMiller.com. I post all of my articles on there, so you can follow what I'm doing for National Review, my podcasts, my freelance writing. That's a way to keep up with what I'm doing. Okay, and so that was the answer to the second question, was how do they find you at the National Review? But heymiller.com, you said? That's it. Is the fastest way. That's it. For my stuff, and of course, National Review is a great website, a great publication with lots of fantastic writers, and that's nationalreview.com. Okay, excellent. Well, John, thanks for joining us this evening. If you hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
Welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. And we appreciate them tremendously. They've made this show possible for nearly 3.5 years now. But we're actually not the reason that they're best known. They're best known for their speaker series. That's one of the reasons we were blessed with having John in the studio this evening, is he'll be speaking just a few minutes from now in Mountain View at 432 Steerlin Road, right here in Mountain View at the Portuguese IFES Hall, because he's the keynote speaker for this evening. In May, we will be joined by Colonel Alan West. And then in June, Jim Garrity from National Review, a colleague of John's, will be addressing the group that night. If you'd like more information on the Conservative Forum, you can find it at the conservativeforum.com. Shows are normally 7 o'clock, second Tuesday of each month. But in closing, John brings up some interesting points about the way things are going in journalism and the ability for you to get involved and to, first of all, being able to discern and consume the information is one thing, but being able to do your research and go out and actually present your side of the story is another option that may be available to you. And it can have tremendous power if you take advantage of that tool. So look him up directly at haymiller.com or find out more about the program Hillsdale offers at hillsdale.edu. We'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. Go out there, get active, do something in journalism or beyond. But if we don't see you either on the show or in person sometime soon, we appreciate your time here tonight. You can reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com or by contacting the studio. Thanks again for joining us. I've been your host, Chris Pareja. This has been The Right Side.